Have you ever wondered why some women, the moment they stop hiding the darkest parts of themselves, suddenly hold a power that unsettles and intoxicates men? It is as if the very air shifts when she no longer pretends to be only light, when she walks into a room with the weight of her own shadow proudly at her side. Men sense it instinctively. Here stands a woman who is no longer a fragile mask of virtue, but a storm, a mirror, a mystery. She is not simply beautiful. She is dangerous, and in that danger she becomes unforgettable. Carl Jung once wrote that the shadow, if ignored, rules us from beneath. But when a woman embraces her shadow, when she integrates the hidden, the repressed, and the forbidden, she ceases to be a fragmented creature. She becomes whole. And wholeness has always been the secret key to obsession. For men are not haunted by what they can possess easily. They are haunted by what reflects their own darkness back to them. The feminine shadow is not only anger or envy. It is seduction, power, hunger, and the untamed fire of a soul that has refused to be silenced. Society has long demanded women bury these elements beneath sweetness and obedience. But when she dares to unearth them, when she refuses to apologize for her intensity, she awakens in men something that terrifies them: recognition. He sees in her what he has denied in himself. He feels his own shadow stir, his own repressed instincts pulse, and suddenly he cannot look away. This is why men become obsessed not with the perfectly good woman, but with the one who carries contradictions like a crown. He may fear her, but he cannot forget her. She is the embodiment of the anima in its fullest expression, the guide to his unconscious, the archetype of mystery he cannot resolve. And so he circles her presence like a moth drawn to flame, knowing he may burn, but unable to resist. To you, listening now, have you noticed how men chase when you no longer chase yourself? When you stop amputating the pieces of your nature just to be acceptable, and instead reclaim every flaw, every shadow, every feral spark, you become magnetic. Not because you play games, but because you no longer live divided. Men are trained to seek conquest, but when they meet a woman who has conquered herself, their world collapses. What can he offer to a woman who does not beg for approval? What can he control in a woman who embraces her chaos as easily as her grace? The Stoics understood this in their own way. Seneca spoke of the man who is enslaved by his passions versus the one who commands them. But what is rarely spoken is how a woman, by commanding her passions, becomes a living paradox. She is calm yet fiery, detached yet overflowing. A man standing before such a woman feels his ego tremble, for he cannot categorize her, and the ego is always obsessed with what it cannot control. Jung would remind us, the shadow is not evil. It is the raw material of transformation. For a woman, integrating the shadow is not about becoming reckless, but about refusing shame. The anger she once suppressed becomes boundary. The jealousy she once hid becomes clarity of desire. The sensuality she buried out of fear becomes creative force. Suddenly, she no longer waits for permission to exist. She becomes the axis of her own universe, and men, who are often entrapped in their own disowned emotions, feel this shift like an earthquake. They sense she is not playing their game. She has invented her own. They become obsessed not with her body, but with the freedom she radiates. It is a freedom they secretly crave, a liberation they have not dared to grant themselves. Her presence exposes their imprisonment. This obsession is not romantic in its softness. It is primal. He dreams of her not because she soothes him, but because she unsettles him. She stands as a mirror to his unclaimed masculinity, his unspoken desires, his hidden rage. And though he may try to dismiss her, though he may even run from her, he cannot erase her from his psyche. Like a haunting, she lingers, because she has awakened the part of him that sleeps. The truth is, when a woman embraces her shadow, she becomes more than a lover. She becomes an archetype. She is Eve and Lilith, Aphrodite and Kali, saint and siren woven into one. She is not asking to be chosen, she is choosing herself. And this act, this sacred defiance, is what ignites obsession. For men do not obsess over what is given freely. They obsess over what challenges their illusion of control. You might ask, but doesn't this make her feared, even resented? Yes. But fear and fascination are twins. The man who fears her cannot forget her. The man who resents her cannot erase her. Because once a woman integrates her shadow, she radiates authenticity so piercing that it brands itself into memory. In the end, it is not beauty alone that captures a man's soul. It is depth. And the deepest depths of a woman lie not in her perfection, but in her shadows. When a woman ceases to exile her shadow, something extraordinary occurs within her presence. Her energy thickens, deepens, becomes a kind of gravity that men cannot explain. The polite smile that once sought approval gives way to a knowing glance, one that sees beyond masks. The voice that once trembled with fear of judgment grows steady, resonant, carrying the weight of hidden truths. She no longer performs sweetness to be loved, nor bends into fragments to be accepted. She stands whole, light braided with darkness, and this wholeness creates a magnetism that unsettles the male psyche. Men are conditioned to pursue what they believe they can conquer. But conquest becomes meaningless in front of a woman who has conquered herself. Her shadow is not a weapon against him. It is a sanctuary for her. She has walked through her own wilderness, faced the beasts of insecurity, envy, desire, and rage, and emerged unashamed. And because she has done what most men have never dared, she embodies a sovereignty that burns into memory. He cannot own what has already claimed itself. He cannot seduce what already dances with its own temptations. So, instead of possession, he is left with obsession. Psychologically, this is projection unraveling before his eyes. Jung taught that the anima, the unconscious feminine within every man, appears to him through the women he encounters. When he meets a woman who embraces her shadow, he does not merely see her, he sees his own disowned feminine soul made flesh. He feels his vulnerability, his repressed emotions, his neglected desires rise up, mirrored back through her existence. It overwhelms him because he cannot escape the truth she reflects. And the more he tries to push her image away, the more it roots itself into his unconscious. This is not ordinary attraction. It is archetypal possession. For you, the woman listening, there is a lesson written in fire here. Do you understand why some men forget countless faces but remember the one woman who shook them to their core? It is not the woman who only smiled sweetly, nor the one who made herself endlessly available. It is the woman who dared to exist in her fullness, even when it made him uncomfortable. It is the woman who stopped apologizing for her shadows and instead wore them like hidden jewels. That woman becomes unforgettable because she awakens in him the parts of himself he refuses to claim. Modern trauma psychology sheds even more light. Men often carry unspoken wounds, childhood shame, fear of failure, suppressed grief. Society tells them to armor up, to silence their hearts. When he meets a woman who has not silenced her own darkness, she resonates with the very wounds he has buried. He feels seen in a way that terrifies him, because she embodies both comfort and confrontation. She does not offer him a sanctuary of denial, she offers him a mirror. And a mirror, when held up to the soul, is impossible to forget. The Stoics would remind us, true power lies not in controlling others, but in ruling oneself. Epictetus warned that no man is free if he is a slave to his passions. Yet what happens when a woman is no longer a slave to hers? She radiates mastery. She knows her rage and channels it into strength. She knows her envy and transforms it into clarity. She knows her hunger and converts it into creation. Standing before her, a man is reminded of his own lack of mastery. And obsession grows not from admiration alone, but from the aching contrast between who he is and who she dares to be. This is why, across cultures and myths, the shadow-bearing woman is always both feared and worshipped. The sirens of Homer, the enchantress Circe, the goddess Kali, all represent the feminine who refuses to stay tame. They lure not by shallow beauty but by the depth of mystery. Men fear being destroyed by them, but they cannot resist approaching. And in truth, the destruction they fear is only the crumbling of their illusions. Imagine it now. A woman sitting silently across from a man. She says little. She hides nothing. Her presence alone unsettles him because it is whole. He cannot predict her, cannot place her neatly into a category of good or bad. She is both. And this contradiction, this duality, seizes his psyche like a riddle he must solve. He does not realize that the riddle is himself. What he calls obsession is, in fact, his unconscious begging for integration. The woman's shadow draws him because it whispers of his own. The more she embraces herself, the more she becomes the key to his locked cage. But here lies the paradox. She does not care to free him. Her journey is her own. And it is precisely this indifference, this detachment, that intensifies his fixation. For obsession grows strongest where control slips through the fingers. There comes a moment when a man realizes he is not simply attracted to her beauty, her laughter, or her warmth. He is held captive by something far more elusive. It is her darkness, not as corruption, but as integration, that keeps him awake at night. She has taken what women are told to bury: the wrath, the sensual hunger, the cunning, the grief, and she has woven it into her being like threads of black silk within white. She no longer tries to hide her contradictions, and because of this, she vibrates with the energy of authenticity. For a man who has been taught to live behind masks, this authenticity is both terrifying and irresistible. The obsession deepens because he senses that she belongs not to him, but to herself. She walks with the poise of someone who has nothing left to prove. A woman who has embraced her shadow does not beg for love. She chooses it. She does not contort herself to be palatable. She offers the truth of who she is, take it or leave it. And for a man, this creates a paradox. He feels powerless before a woman who is not dependent on him. Yet that very independence enslaves his thoughts. He cannot conquer what does not seek conquest, and so he becomes consumed with wanting what cannot be possessed. Jung would say that such a woman embodies individuation, the wholeness that arises when the conscious and unconscious have been reconciled. She is no longer fragmented. The rejected child within her has been welcomed. The silenced temptress within her has been honored. The enraged warrior within her has been given a throne. In this wholeness, she embodies a fullness of life energy that radiates. Men sense this not intellectually but instinctively. It is an aura, a field of power that forces them into confrontation with themselves. They become obsessed because they are caught between awe and envy, between admiration of her courage and fear of their own incompleteness. And you, the woman listening, must ask, what would it mean to stop hiding your shadow? To no longer apologize for your anger, your ambition, your desires? Can you imagine the liberation of walking into a room without shrinking, without fearing that your depth might be too much? This is the liberation of shadow embrace. And this liberation does not merely shift how you see yourself, it shifts how others orbit around you. A man cannot look into the eyes of a woman who has embraced her shadow without feeling the tremor of his own. Modern psychology tells us that repression breeds compulsion. What we push down becomes what rules us. A man who represses his grief becomes obsessed with women who remind him of loss. A man who represses his desire becomes fixated on women who embody sensual freedom. A man who represses his anger becomes consumed with women who stand unafraid in their own fire. Obsession is never about the woman herself. It is about the shadow she reflects. Yet for him, this distinction is invisible. All he knows is that he cannot stop thinking of her. The Stoics taught equanimity, the calmness that comes when one's inner world is ordered. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And here lies the irony. When a woman takes power over her own shadow, she gains mastery over what no man can touch, her essence. He can beg, flatter, manipulate, even flee, but he cannot erase the power of a woman who has already faced herself. His obsession grows because he senses a fortress within her, a self-containment that no desire of his can breach. And though he may rage against it, he also bows to it in silence. Myth after myth echoes this truth. Think of Persephone, who was not only the maiden of spring but also the queen of the underworld. Her power lay not in purity alone, but in her descent. She could walk in both worlds, and that duality made her untouchable. Men are haunted by women who remind them of this mythic descent, women who have tasted their own underworlds and returned unbroken. Such women carry the fragrance of both light and darkness, and that scent alone intoxicates. Picture it. She laughs, but her laughter carries an undertone of sorrow she does not hide. She kisses, but in her kiss lives both tenderness and hunger. She stands in silence, but in that silence there is defiance. Every gesture carries weight because it springs not from performance, but from truth. A man feels this, and it destabilizes him. For how can he anchor himself in her when she anchors herself in something deeper than approval? He cannot, and so obsession becomes inevitable. What he calls desire is often a desperate hunger for what she has already found, integration. He chases her because he cannot yet chase himself. He clings to her image because it promises a union he has not dared to seek within. And still, she does not bend. She does not rush to rescue him from his shadows. She has done her work, and she knows. Every man must walk into his own abyss. The more she descends into herself, the more untouchable she becomes. A woman who has embraced her shadow ceases to be an object of possession and transforms into a force of nature. She is like the ocean, calm on the surface yet containing unfathomable depths that no sailor can fully chart. Men, sensing this, become intoxicated, not with her appearance but with the abyss she represents. To him, she is no longer merely a partner, a companion, or a lover. She becomes a portal into mystery itself. And mystery has always been the most addictive substance to the human mind. Obsession takes root in this very mystery. The man begins to dream of her not as she truly is, but as the mirror of his own unconscious. He projects into her the fragments of himself he has abandoned. She becomes, in his imagination, both healer and destroyer, angel and temptress, salvation and curse. He oscillates between worship and fear, desire and resentment. This duality is unbearable to him, yet he cannot let go. The shadow she carries has awakened the shadow within him, and now his soul is restless. From the perspective of Jungian depth psychology, she has activated his anima, the feminine principle within every man. The anima, when unintegrated, manifests as obsession with an external woman. He cannot yet realize that what he longs for is not her body, not even her love, but the reconciliation with the forsaken parts of himself. Still, the woman who has embraced her shadow is not responsible for his healing. Her power is not in saving him, but in being herself so fully that he must confront what he has avoided. This is where many women falter. They feel the pull of his obsession and mistake it for love. They think his fixation means he values her essence, when in truth he is caught in a psychic battle with his own unconscious. Yet, the woman who truly understands her shadow knows not to fall into this illusion. She does not mistake obsession for devotion. She recognizes it for what it is, projection. And she knows that to step into that role, to become the vessel of his unclaimed soul, would be to betray her own. So she remains sovereign. She allows him to orbit, to desire, to dream, but she does not abandon her center. for she knows the secret the Stoics also carried. Attachment to what lies outside your control is the seed of suffering, and she will not trade her freedom for the temporary intoxication of being worshipped. Her worth was not born in his eyes, and so it cannot die in his absence. Yet precisely this refusal to surrender herself to his projections deepens his obsession, because obsession feeds not on possession, but on absence. The more she refuses to be caged, the more his psyche burns. It is the paradox of desire. What is given too easily loses its fire, but what stands beyond reach becomes eternal. Men may forget countless lovers who yielded everything, but they never forget the woman who remained an enigma even in intimacy, the woman whose essence could never be fully consumed. Imagine it. A man sits alone after she has left the room. He feels unsettled, restless. He replays her words, her glance, her silence. He feels her presence even in her absence, like a haunting melody he cannot silence. He tells himself she was dangerous, too intense, too much, but in the quiet hours he cannot escape the truth. He longs for her because she showed him himself, and he is not yet strong enough to bear it. Myth and history are filled with such figures. Cleopatra, whose presence bent empires not only because of beauty, but because she embodied power and cunning unapologetically. Medea, feared and vilified yet remembered for her refusal to shrink into obedience. Even in modern times, the woman who claims her anger, her sexuality, her ambition without apology becomes unforgettable. She writes herself into memory not by seeking it, but by daring to live her fullness in a world that demands halves. And for you, listening, the lesson is carved in stone. A man's obsession is not your crown. His fixation is not your validation. It is merely a reflection of the depth you have reclaimed. Do not measure your worth by the fire in his eyes, for his fire is not yours to tend. Your worth lies in the quiet knowing that you have embraced every part of yourself, the light, the dark, the saint, the siren, and in doing so, you have become whole. The paradox remains. The less you need him, the more he needs you. The less you bend, the more he clings. The less you hide, the more he hungers. And yet, true freedom lies not in using this power to ensnare him, but in using it to liberate yourself from the need to be ensnared at all. For obsession is his prison, but your shadow embraced is your liberation. The culmination of her journey is not the man's obsession, it is her own liberation. For when a woman embraces her shadow, she ceases to live in fragments. She no longer trims her edges to fit into the cages of expectation. She no longer hides her hunger behind politeness, nor silences her grief behind smiles. She carries herself as one who has tasted every part of existence, the light, the dark, the sacred, the profane, and emerged whole. And wholeness is the true aphrodisiac, the true magnetism. But its purpose is not to captivate him, it is to free her. The man's obsession becomes the byproduct, not the goal. He circles her presence because he senses in her what he lacks. He feels her authenticity burn through the illusions of his own ego, and it rattles him. But she is not defined by his restlessness. She does not mold herself to soothe his turmoil. She has walked into her own abyss and returned, and that journey has nothing to do with him. She knows now that obsession, while flattering to the ego, is irrelevant to the soul. Jung wrote that individuation is the path of the self becoming whole. In embracing her shadow, she has reached the gates of individuation. She becomes her own axis, her own compass, her own truth. And in this, she finds peace that no man can either give or take. She recognizes his fixation as a mirror of his own unclaimed soul, but she does not mistake it for destiny. For her destiny is not to be the muse of his awakening. It is to live in the fullness of her own. Think of it. The greatest power is not in being desired, but in no longer needing desire to validate your existence. When she knows her worth, she does not beg for love. When she honors her shadow, she does not shrink for acceptance. When she carries her contradictions with pride, she becomes untouchable. And in that untouchability lies true freedom. Men may obsess, whisper, even worship, but she remains unshaken. Her life is not defined by who chases her, but by the horizon she chooses to walk toward. She knows that obsession is not the same as love, that fixation is not the same as devotion. She has learned that the only gaze that matters is the gaze she casts upon herself, the gaze that sees every shadow, every scar, every secret, and still declares whole, worthy, radiant. This truth is echoed even in Stoic wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And when her thoughts no longer war against themselves, when the light and shadow within her no longer fight for dominance, she enters an unshakable calm. Her peace does not tremble before rejection, nor does it inflate before praise. She becomes steady, like a mountain unmoved by the storms that whip around it. The man may obsess, but she has no need to bend into the shape of his obsession, for she knows the secret that so few ever discover. Freedom lies in self-acceptance. By embracing her shadow, she has disarmed the chains of shame. By embracing her shadow, she has severed the need for permission. By embracing her shadow, she has stepped into the sacred fire of authenticity. And once a woman has walked through that fire, she does not return to the prison of performance. So, the story does not end with his fixation. The story ends with her rebirth. She no longer fears abandonment because she no longer abandons herself. She no longer fears rejection because she no longer rejects herself. She no longer fears being too much because she knows the truth. She was never too much. She was only too real for those still hiding from themselves. And now, she is free. Free to love without chains. Free to walk away without guilt. Free to stand in her power without apology. The man may remain haunted, obsessed, unable to let go, but she does not carry his chains. For she has claimed the only love that truly liberates, the love of her whole self. And so the final truth is revealed, a truth as sharp as a blade and as gentle as dawn. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.